All right then. So yeah, I mean, I think we can go ahead, as I mentioned. So thank you so much joining us today, Mathieu. This is our, I think, ninth edition of the Agri-Food Connect. And before we begin, before we dive in, I would like to talk about, Kök Projekt and the Agri-Food Connect and what we're working on for our participants and who are people who are watching us. It might be a repetition for those of you who have participated to our webinars or know our organizations quite closely, but I would like to, take this opportunity to talk about really briefly about Kök Projekt and what are we working on and what is actually the Agri-Food Connect. So that being said, we are, in a traditional sense, an accelerator and a corporate innovation partner for companies of agriculture, food, and water. We only work within this sector. Our work focuses on through the whole journey of seed to the plate, or one of the new upcoming terms that I've seen, from soil to the shelf. So we cover all of these steps in each part of the agri-food value chain, and we develop acceleration programs, corporate innovation programs, and we work closely with startups. That being said, what it is Agri-Food Connect? So Agri-Food Connect is our program that we've been developing over the course of the months with the crisis in hand. So with the pandemic and changing habits of consumption, production habits, and changing needs and also necessities regarding all of these, COVID-19 situation that we have in hand, we realize we need to, create a global conversation around food that talks about, what it is exactly the shape of agri-food sector in the future and how can the startups can actually adapt to it and also overcome and build novel products and services. The program itself is about building a virtual collaboration all across the globe, and ideally is to bringing together the companies and startups together to work together, and for startups to develop their products and services directly within those companies' value chain. What that program consists is that the series of webinars, as such as we do like this, and also an online sprint where the startups are going to come up with their novel products and solutions to apply directly to those companies' value chain. And the next step will be, we will be moving into an Agile mentorship program where we will be working closely with the startups on their products, services, portfolio, team management. And in the last step, we will be working with them on a pre-acceleration program to help them grow. So that's pretty much what it is, Agri-Food Connect. It's a virtual collaboration platform that we've been working on. And if you would like to know more about, what is Kök Projekt or Agri-Food Connect or other stuff that we do, you can log into our website, which is kökprojekt.com, and you can join into our newsletter and get to know all of the stuff that we do and the reports and all of the studies we do. And also in the meantime, we do have a digital community. We call it Kök Community. It's a Slack platform. It's free to join, and it has representatives all across from the startups to agri-food sector. So feel free to just, after our webinar, after our session, to check out our website and look the other stuff that we do, and definitely join into our newsletter. So that being said, moving to today's subject, the Agri-Food Connect. As I mentioned, I think this is our 9th or 8th edition. We are today with Mathieu Vincent. He's the co-founder of DigitalFoodLab, where I will be passing the mic to him to explain what they're working on and what it is the DigitalFoodLab. So thank you so much for joining us today, Mathieu. Happy to have you here with us. And please go ahead and explain, what are you guys working on and your experience with the agri-food sector.
Yeah, and so, I will just share my screen if it works. And it should do it. Is it a good one? Yeah. We'll do that. Okay. And you full screen. And is that okay? Do you see the screen?
Absolutely.
Yeah, perfect. So thank you for the invitation to talk to this webinar. And so first, I'll introduce, we are DigitalFoodLab. So basically, we are a team of two. 10 years ago, I would say incidentally, we created one of the first French FoodTech startups, and we raised money and developed it. We exited 3 years ago, and then we created DigitalFoodLab with, I would say, a very simple goal, which is to help grow this ecosystem of FoodTech in Europe. So just a few words on myself. I'm Mathieu. I'm the co-founder of DigitalFoodLab, and as I said, I've been an entrepreneur in FoodTech for 10 years and founder of DigitalFoodLab, where we work with a lot of startups, a lot of accelerators, and mostly with big retail and food corporates. What we do is pretty basically to help them first understand what's happening in FoodTech. Then we give them a lot of advice, of insight about how they could work a bit more like or with a startup. And obviously we help them build innovation strategy in order to become more innovative and obviously to be part of this ecosystem. In a few minutes, what I will present to you before moving to Q&A is the results of our report on European FoodTech. It's a report that is free. You can download it on our website, and we've released it 2 weeks ago. So first point, why we do that, this kind of report, it's just because at the origin with my partners, we are engineers, and we do like to have some kind of figures and some kind of data to just measure the size of what we are talking about, in this case, the FoodTech ecosystem. And then what do we mean by FoodTech? For us, FoodTech is basically everything that's happening in terms of innovation born by startup, from agriculture to delivery, going through food science, retail, food service, and coaching. So it's all this ecosystem. By innovation, we mean everything from new product, new distribution, new marketing, or obviously new business model. Just to give you an idea about what we're talking about, FoodTech in Europe, it's an ecosystem which is growing really fast. So as you can see, in 2014, it was like €500 million invested each year in the European FoodTech. And now in 2019, it was like 2.4 billion invested. And so it's growing really, really fast. But what is really interesting is to go a bit deeper. And so, for example, what we've mapped in this graph, we've looked at where is the money going. And so in blue, you have the money going into the set of 7 unicorns, 7 European unicorns. So startups really well known like Deliveroo, HelloFresh, Just Eat, or Takeaway. And as you can see, they were taking more than half of the money 3 years ago, and now we can see that we have a new generation of startups. So that's really cool to see that the first wave of now unicorn is giving way to new kind of innovation. And so who are these new leaders? What you can see on this graph are the startups that have raised most money, the 5 logos in each year, and the number of deals. So you have the number of big deals bigger than 500K. And as you can see, we have both a rise in number of investments as we have a rise of the amounts invested into FoodTech. So we have a very healthy ecosystem in Europe, which is growing really fast, and which is getting more and more diverse. What is also interesting, because Europe can't really be compared to the US, because when you look at the US, you have basically one country, one retail system, one regulation system, which is not the case in Europe. And so we have looked at where in Europe specifically investments are happening. And as you can see, it's pretty clear. We tend to divide it into 3 groups or four, one group could be just the UK, which are clearly a big leader and have been the leader of European food tech for the past 5 years. Then you have a group or 4 to 5 countries, which are France, Spain, Netherlands, Germany, and combine the 4 Nordics countries. And then you have basically the rest of Europe, which is made of either small countries or big countries such as Italy with rather slow investments in food tech. And as I said, one of the big surprise of our study research in this report was the findings about this Nordics ecosystem, which is maybe one of the most interesting in Europe because it's really diverse. It's made of really interesting technologically advanced startups. So more and more when we are talking about with foreign corporates from Asia to the US, we tend to say to them, just have a look at what's happening in the Nordics. To move forward, actually, food tech is not even happening in countries, it's just happening in some cities. So to give you an idea, if you combine London, Berlin, Amsterdam, and Paris, and Barcelona, you have 72% of the investment made into food tech in Europe. So it's really, really concentrated into a small number of cities. But, and that's main, I would say, disturbing point, Europe is rising, but not rising as fast as investment are rising on a global level. So right now, Europe is just 14% of the global investment into food tech. As you can see on this graph, in gray, you have the investments on a global scale, and Europe is just really small on this ecosystem. It would not be a surprise, investments are dominated by the US, which are between 49 to 55% of the global investments. But then you are, after them you have China, then India, and finally in fourth position, Europe. So we are really late in growing a food tech ecosystem on Europe. And lastly, because food tech, as I said, is a really large ecosystem, we have divided from left, you have all the active food tech startups, so their distribution in Europe. In the middle, you have the distribution of the deals. So one, I would say 50 million deal is equal to one 50K deal. And on the right, you have the distribution of the money invested. And it's pretty clear that if you have a balanced distribution of the startups, of the deals, investments are still highly concentrated into delivery and into agtech. So why is that interesting? It is if you compare it to the US and other regions where, for example, you have much more money put into food science, new innovative products. I think that's one of the main weakness of the European food tech ecosystem is that we don't put enough money into food science and into innovation, mainly into plant-based meat alternatives and kind of things. And the question which may come is why? Why is because we don't have a European markets. Because, for example, if I take my case, when I work with a French startup doing meat alternatives, it has to develop in France to make its marketing, its branding, etc. But then if it wants to go to Turkey, to Germany, to everything, it has different laws, different rules, and most important of all, customers with different habits. And that's a really big pain for this kind of startups. And finally, we can't talk about innovation, and I would say we can't talk about anything without talking about COVID. So just sharing with you some thoughts on what we think or what we see in terms of COVID, what it would be the impact of it into the ecosystem. To be positive, I think we see 5 trends that are strengthened by this crisis. First one is grocery marketplace. So the fact to reinvent the grocery experience. We see startups in Sweden, in the Netherlands. You may have seen Picnic, which has raised 250 million to develop a new online supermarket. So these kind of startups are really strengthened by this ecosystem, by this crisis. Then you have all this idea of being food independent, to be able to grow food in your own country or in your own city. And so that gives much more strength to meat alternatives, especially cell-based, lab-grown, to urban farming. We have also the trend about drones and robots, which gain a lot of strength during the crisis. And finally, you have everything around the distribution, the logistics, and the making more digital food restaurants and hospitality. So we see these 4 to 5 trends to be the key winners of COVID. And to conclude, if you want to see a bit more about what we do, you can go on our website. We have a lot of reports, such as this one on European FoodTech investments. We have made a free report on what's happening in FoodTech during COVID, and a lot of newsletters and mini reports or videos that you can look at if you want to have more insight about what's happening into FoodTech. And obviously, if you have any question or want to dig deeper into a subject, please feel free to contact me.
Excellent, excellent, Mathieu. Thank you so much for this presentation. I want to dive right in. So one of the keywords that from this webinar definitely on my mind will be the innovation is not happening in the countries, but it's actually in the cities. So there's only like 4 main cities that actually drives this innovation. So can you tell us a bit more about the ecosystem in Paris? Well, in France in general, if you would like to, and how would you position France and Paris ecosystem regarding agri-food sector compared to the other ecosystems in Europe?
Yeah, it's really happening in cities pretty much for a simple reason, because entrepreneurs have moved there because most of them are freshmen outside of universities, and universities are into cities. And when a startup is rising, is raising money, and money is into venture capitalist pockets, and they are located into cities. So there are not much other reason for that. And I would say what's interesting in the Paris FoodTech ecosystem is that it's really diverse, and it has really succeeded into building something, but I would say its weakness is it's lacking a place. There is no FoodTech, no place where you will be able to go at each time of the day or each time of the year and meet FoodTech people. Okay. So you have some incubators which are some kind of interest into FoodTech, but they are not really succeeding into developing this kind of hub, which I think it's a bit different to other cities. And what's lacking in France compared to other countries is the fact that we don't have a unicorn. So we don't have this big or 1 or 2 big startups which you have in the UK or in Germany. So you don't have these startups that everybody knows. If I ask you just like that, you may just don't know a French FoodTech startup, because we have a lot of them, but they're really concentrated into B2B, which is one of the strengths of the French tech ecosystem. Traditionally, French funders create B2B startups, and rather than B2C ones.
I see. And this is one of the questions that I keep asking all of our, guest speakers when we, dive into the ecosystems, is that the involvement of, governmental organizations or local authorities, like how is the, for example, the perspective on the French government regarding when we're talking about all of this, innovation. I know it's quite high when we are, looking into like the tech side, saying the Europe's new, the new Silicon Valley will become, Paris, the France will lead that innovation and that kind of like value propositions. I remember years ago, back in maybe like 2 years ago in France Digital. And is this same, attitude, same vibe is exist in agri-food sector as well? Or is it like more or less still focused on, high impact technologies?
A fun story is when people in France created this French tech Lebel, which was really cool because its goal was to communicate on foreign land about the French ecosystem. So it was really well done because in France we didn't perceive it until people from outside called and talked to us about it. So it's a big success, but it's communication, but it's a good success. But when they were considering it, it was just at the last minute that someone said, "Oh, but we've forgotten FoodTech."
Right.
Because the idea of innovating on food is not really, it's still not there. Because I would say the idea, it's my theory. It's in the countries which don't have big food culture that food innovation is happening, because you are not disrupting too much habits in the UK, Netherlands, in Sweden, in Germany, and in Italy, France, it's complicated.
Right. It's ironic, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it, because the food culture, I mean, it's no brainer, like the food culture in France and the impact of it all around the world is quite, existential for throughout the centuries. And we're looking into saying, why don't we see the same thing in innovation, which would make, quite a lot of sense. But that's also really interesting. And I would like to, move from the cultural aspect and also the French ecosystem, with the crisis in hand and with all of these adaptations and changing habits with the, the food and agriculture sector. Do you see any like successful attempts, or, could be like failure attempts as well, on the sense of agri-food sector from the companies, from startups? Is there any of the examples you would like to give or mention?
I would say it's really too soon to see how things will be and what will be the world of after, which a lot of people are talking about. I would say I'm just worried for two kinds of startups. First type are all the startups which were just planning on raising money in, I would say, the incoming 4 to 6 months. Right. I'm kind of worried for them, and also all the category of startups which were doing growth through high cost acquisition. Right. Because it's like a big switch where now everyone is talking about being profitable.
Right, of course.
It's just crazy. 3 months ago it was, what is your growth percentage, etc., etc. Oh, I don't care about profitability. And now say
it's just like go.
Yeah, I want profits, but you can't. And we are seeing startups switching gears toward profitability, but it's not simple.
I see. It's I think one of the keywords that I remember with our webinar with the with Matthias last week. He's the CEO of the Smart Hectare Innovation based in Berlin, and he talks about the startups in Germany actually, looking into investments outside of Germany, because it's not really that ripened yet regarding the investment side of it, of the agri-food sector. Do we see the same situation in France as well, or is it like more or less interested? Because talking about raising
we have and it will come back to one of your question about the government implication. It has been really slow to start in terms of creating food and ag VCs, but now money is here. And I would say the issue is we've created maybe too much VCs and big VCs and not enough seed pockets. So it can be a bit, I think it's harder to raise 1 to 200K than to raise 1 to 10 million. One big success, I would say, from this government policy is now a French startup can raise 50 to 100 million.
Right.
But one of the failure is we don't have enough startups in, I would say, able to raise 1 or 2 million.
I see. That's
so we have enough money and we have foreign investors coming into France to invest, but it's them coming and not startups coming into seeing them.
Wow, I mean, that's something that really interesting, because for me, like, on my mind, it's just like it's booming as an ecosystem, as an agri-food as well, with some of the the outlets and some of the success. But as you mentioned, I mean, having a unicorn always changed the perspective, right? I mean, just like brings more attention to the sector itself. But that being said, is one of the questions for any of the startups who are participating or watching later on. How I would say, foreign friendly is the French ecosystem for a startup would like to move into France? This is a question that I keep asking all of the participants in each country, and we do have, quite diverse answers. Some of them would say, it's pretty unfriendly, no need to think about it, and the rest of them would say, if you think about it, we would like to invest on this, etc. So with your perspective, how friendly is the French ecosystem, since if there's not enough startups who can raise those capitals? Do you think the ones who can should think moving to Paris or France, or should they not ever consider that? What's your
I think they should and they could, but with the idea that you will be in France operating on the French market. So if you have a technology or something that is interesting, for example, we are talking with a couple of Italian startups which are facing both domestic difficulties in terms of market and VCs that don't have money, basically, and they are trying to move in France to raise money there.
Right.
So I think it's just a question of timing, but depends on the country. But either you move when you have just an idea, or you move when you are well established in your country. But moving in the middle, it's a bit weird.
Yeah, for sure. Especially right now, right? I mean, it's not even. I mean, you're not even actually traveling between the cities and talking about moving ecosystems is something that is for the years to come. But I would like to, since we're talking about this and talking about startups and talking about moving them or just need, what are the top the topics or the business models or products that you think is missing in France, and investors are actually looking into it? Or is it like deep tech, nano AI, or rather more simple as like a marketplace?
I think one aspect is lacking, but also because investors are not that interested into funding it. So you can raise and develop it, but you have to be good. It's basically everything around direct consumer brands. I think if you take France, Germany, and especially Italy and Spain, you don't have much of them. And you can develop well-established direct consumer brands there. So if you are good at that, to have relationship with suppliers, retailers, and customers, that's a huge opportunity. So I would say that's the first point. And also the French ecosystem is lacking into plant-based and cell-based, lab-grown dairy meat. We have almost nothing there. So I think that's a huge opportunity.
That's interesting. You didn't mention blockchain, which is something that I was actually looking forward to hear from, but it's not really something in the radar, I think, right? I mean,
I think we, as everywhere, we had 2 or 3 years ago, we had hundreds of blockchain projects, which now are trying to erase the blockchain word of the description. And so we are seeing some of them getting more serious. So, but yeah, it's like, does blockchain add value to an issue, to a proposal, a value proposition? I don't think doing blockchain is just something.
Right. And on terms of, you mentioned a lot of, alternative protein. This is something, especially a conversation I keep having with my business partner as well, is saying, do the alternative proteins will stick in Europe or in the Middle East and Turkey, etc.
Yeah.
But you see as a high potential in this sector, right? As I understand.
Yeah.
But rather do you think on the, the plant-based and because of the change in consumption habits, or rather on the, lab grown or maybe just algae-based because of the need of food security and food safety, or both? Like which is the direction that is more interested, or
Well,
in your
I would say really depends on who you are as an entrepreneur. If you want something quicker and you are not R&D specialist into meat, you will not go into lab grown. But I would say in Europe, we are still lagging a lot behind the US in terms of just plant-based. For example, we have very few brands in France for plant-based milk.
Mm-hmm.
And launching a smartly marketed plant-based milk, oat milk, could be a huge success. So that's pretty basic. There is no technology there, and could be a great success. But if you are a specialist and you want to go into R&D, there are huge opportunities into lab-grown dairy, lab-grown meat, but there are much more riskier projects.
Right. But it's also like about the consumption habits, as we can say, I guess, right? I mean, because it's just, the French food culture is quite open to the, all the dairy products and consuming a lot of milk, using a lot of, dairy products as well. But, coming back to the topic of, the food security, food safety, and also sovereignty, since this is also one of the trend topics as we discussed, because, talking about importing and exporting food is not really the case right now, because no one really preferring anything sent out or anything sent in. How's the situation regarding on this? Do any startups or any examples you would like to give, tackling on these issues like food safety, traceability, or security, or even like sovereignty? Are we, do you see any rise in the vertical farming, urban farming technologies, or any of the interest on this?
I would say urban farming has maybe missed a key opportunity. Wow. Because we have been talking about it for 5 to 6 years, and I would say a lot of people were expecting a bit more, and now we are all seeing that it's like a bit marketing.
Right.
We don't see much productivity. It's like, okay, we want to have urban farming, which looks nice on rooftops of some buildings, but if we want to reach productivity, is like we need old buildings to just dedicated to that, and we're still in Europe, we have not moved there.
Right.
We have not reached to what you can see in Japan or in the US, where you have just highly productive pace.
Right. But it's also, I mean, it's a great keyword, and that's also one of the takes that I would like, take in our session, is that, miss the opportunity, which is something really interesting, because it's also the case of now saying, if you want to, have some, fresh herbs and fresh greens, or like lettuce and all these stuff, pretty hygienic environment, and then no human contact and contactless production, and all of these keywords are tagged along with all of this. But it's also correct that, because if they were there maybe a year ago and then have that bump, we might have been talking about quite aggressive startups now. But you're saying basically that's also the missed opportunity. And what do you see that on the agriculture sector then, since we're just like slowly drifting to that? How do you see the French agriculture ecosystem on this? Like, we talked a lot about, food tech, but how do you see the agriculture technologies? Like, how adaptable the producers in France, are they open to it? Or how's your perspective on this?
The French agriculture is, I don't really like this word, but it's like in crisis, and it has been for the last couple of decades, because basically we have a system built on the end of World War II, where the idea was push productivity, be able to nourish the population, and it reached a peak in the 90s, and so now we are still balancing, do we want quality or productivity? And I would say for the last 3 years, the policy has been, we need to push on quality. And so there is quite a consensus in France to refuse big farms, to refuse productivity in order to have better quality.
Right.
But that leads to issues where you have less and less products produced in France and imported from big farms in Spain. So we lack a vision for what a good farm system should be in France. Because I don't really believe in this idea of having a lot of small farmers on farms which just look like farms 200 years ago, which are small, not really productive.
Right.
And the farms are not really using a lot of tech in France, at least, because they are not big enough.
I mean, I was going to move into that, that was my next question, actually. This is some question that I also asked previously, is that if you had a coin that you're going to invest, 2 topics in agriculture, one of them is about basically, all of these urban farming technologies, vertical farming, and basically produce anything you want in anywhere. And the other one is that, open field production, more digitalized, added blockchain, and all of these technologies focusing on efficiency, quality. Which one do you see more potential? This is a personal, perspective, and based on the data that you guys working on.
I would still bet on urban farming. I think because money is in the cities, and big changes are still coming. I see a lot of opportunities. For example, just park lots, which are being transformed in Paris into urban farms, etc., could be huge opportunities. And even if it's just marketing, urban farming startups will have a huge potential in front of them, because cities want just to market the idea that they can build or produce some food.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That's one of the cases with the crisis, right? I mean, since we're not really able to travel between the cities, and rather the countries, but being able to produce all of these food within all of these city limits could have been really interesting to see. So that's great to hear. You're betting on this section. So before I continue, I would like to turn to our participants, the audience. If you have any questions you would like to ask to Mathieu, you can just type those into a Q&A section or the chat section, and then we can answer them live if you have any questions. I wanted to just remind that. In the meantime, I wanted to go back really briefly on we talked about this, but since you were also an entrepreneur before, I mean, you guys were a startup with Jeremy, and then you raised money, and then you did an exit, and then build the digital food lab of today. So what was your experience being an entrepreneur? What was your startups about? Like, what you guys were working on back then, and how long ago? This was almost like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah. So it lasted 6 years, and we created it in 2010. It was named WeCook, and basically it was a coaching service, a subscription coaching service. So you subscribe, and each week we send to you ideas about what you should eat. And so it was basically ideas of recipes, grocery lists, kind of thing, with advice from dietitians to just reach your goals. It was not intended to single people trying to lose weight, but rather to moms looking to buy different food and do quick, easy, simple, but tasty meals. And so, from 2010 to 2016, where we exited and sold it to a small health company.
Nice. And I wanted to, based on that business model, that was actually a longer version to ask this question. This is one of the, quote unquote controversial topics when we're talking about all of these, nutrition services and these kind of idea or either directly service. there's a startup, and there are some similar ones as well, working on corporate nutrition. So focusing on the performances of the, the employees within all of these companies, and using the data they collect from their either DNA or any of the information they provide, and looking into their allergies and understanding their bodies, to basically providing them and serving them the food they will, perform them well. What is your thoughts on the future of the corporate nutrition programs such as like this, or do you also find it controversial, or how do you see the potential of this kind of like a service? Would that be something of a new strategy for all these startups?
We are really fond of all this idea about personalization, DNA, microbiome, this kind of thing. We are still really cautious about the fact that we are not still sure it works, because from one test, from one DNA test to another one, you can have really, really different results. So I think right now the science is not as advanced that a lot of startups will like us to believe. But I really like this B2B corporate approach. I think it's fun. It's not the one that we choose, because I prefer that at this time to have a relationship with the final customer. But it's also really interesting to do this kind of challenge in company. But yeah, there are a lot of issues in terms of data and security, responsibilities, kind of thing. And I think that a lot of things that we could do a few years ago are much more complicated right now, with a lot of regulation on data.
Of course. And I wanted to move into my last question. Since you guys are working, heavily in data, preparing all these reports, some free, some to membership and sort of like collaboration based. I wanted to have your thoughts on what is your for a startup, let's say, or an entrepreneur who's thinking to move into the field of agri-food sector. What is your top 3 topics you should you would definitely recommend to the food entrepreneurs based on the data and the trends that you're seeing, based on investments or any of the stuff that is existing out there? What is your top 3 subjects that you would recommend?
I would say for right now, for a young entrepreneur without a lot of experience, my main advice would be just book a plane when it's possible, and just go to London or the US, but London is enough, and just go and spend 2 days just shopping. Go to the stores, look at what people are doing, and you'll discover a lot of these new brands which are pretty easy to build we see a lot of things in plant-based, in snacking, and also a lot of things in food supplements. And just wonder, is this product, if I adapt it, would it be a success in my country? And I see a lot of simple, easy to develop opportunities. So that would be maybe one of my first thing to work on just right now. And I would say for entrepreneurs with more either capital in terms of money or experience, I would maybe move into packaging, which is obviously something that everyone is talking about, but entrepreneurs are not moving in this ecosystem. So that's something. And I will definitely look into launching a new grocery marketplace. So either launching my supermarket with my logistics, or something like Instacart in the US, so Uber for groceries.
Awesome. These are definitely great advices, absolutely. And the marketplace one, I'm definitely agreeing with it. Like, that's one of the, especially these days, right? I mean, like, if you're small and if you have the problems in the logistics, if you solve those, you're great right now. I mean, you're gonna able to provide all of these products. Mathieu, I mean, these are my questions. So thank you so much answering all of these stuff. Is there anything that you would like to add as a sign off, like any of the cool stuff, exciting stuff that you guys are working on, or any of the stuff that you would like to announce?
Not as much. We're still moving into new missions with clients or reports, but nothing much to announce right now. It was a pleasure to be with you and to have this chat. And if you or other people attending have any question, they can just contact us.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Mathieu. Thank you so much for joining us today. As I mentioned on the beginning of the webinar, for our attendees and people who are watching it, you will be able to find the recording of this webinar in the YouTube channel of Kök Projekt. Also, as I mentioned, if you log into our website, which is kökprojekt.com, you can register our newsletters and check all of the stuff that we do and get to know it the first hand. And you can check the other videos that on the webinars that we do in our YouTube channel as well. So I would like to, thank everyone joining us today, and also thank you so much, Mathieu. It was absolutely a pleasure to hearing all of these, great stuff and great insights about, your work, Digital Food Lab, and also the French ecosystem. So thank you so much, and have a nice evening, and take care. See you soon.